Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, the podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas and signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I am really excited to have a very special guest on. It is my friend Debbie Tate, and she is the Chief Development Officer for the Texas Advocacy Project. And they host an annual black and white ball that has grown to be one of the most successful galas in Austin each year. And this year is their 20th anniversary. And Debbie has been a powerhouse development officer and fundraiser in Central Texas and beyond for many, many years. And she will just provide so many great insights about donor engagement, event engagement, and, as well as learning more about the Texas Advocacy Project and the black and white ball. So with that, Debbie, welcome. And I'm just so glad that we made the time to chat today.
Thank you, Rob. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you for your longtime friendship and support of the different nonprofits in our community and across the state. And I'm excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't we start with tell us a little bit about the mission of the Texas Advocacy Project?
Texas Advocacy Project is a statewide nonprofit, and we work to end dating and domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, stalking, and human trafficking in Texas.
Thank you for stating that and the many different types of services to do that. And I also like that you all are statewide. And it's funny because like I saw like last year that you all got a grant from the Dallas Mavericks for that was done at the Mavs ball. So I mean it's just it goes to show the wide reaching impact. Even though you're based in Austin, you have folks from throughout the state. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about how and why you joined the Texas Advocacy Project, because you've worked at many organizations, many top organizations for many years. But what made you say, you know what, I really, want to join this organization and, make this the next part of my career?
I think the simplest answer is I had worked in an organization that was really working on child abuse, specifically child sexual abuse, physical abuse, and children that had witnessed violent crime here in Austin and Travis County. And, you know, thinking about how you can take your skills and apply them and serve even more people was the biggest draw to go to work for Texas Advocacy Project. And for short, I may say TAP. Advocacy is hard to say over and over again without really thinking about it. And with Texas Advocacy Project, think of us as a law firm. We provide all the civil legal services for people to get out of unsafe situations that require a legal remedy. You just don't think about it, but day to day, we're in contracts, whether it's, when you have a child with somebody, basically you're now locked, to that person with that child. When you get married, when you lease an apartment with somebody and, are in a contractual agreement there. And oftentimes you're not sure of what your rights are to keep yourself safe. And that's what we can provide is that legal consultation to let you know what your rights are and how you can move forward if you are ready to get out of an unsafe situation.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the legal piece, because I don't think people realize that that's a reason a lot of people stay in unsafe situations is they don't necessarily know how to get out of it, and just all the legal trouble that can kind of come from doing that. So I'm glad that you mentioned that piece, because that's such a critical component for people to get out of unsafe situations. And, you had mentioned, your previous organization, you had mentioned, you protect vulnerable children, and now it's kind of a wider net. What makes you passionate about that you've made, your career about raising awareness and funds for protecting those who suffer from abuse or domestic violence?
Personally, I was raised in a family that always wanted to give back. They're very civilly involved, my grandparents and my parents. And so I had really good mentors growing up, and that just was a way of life for us. And it's funny because well, you're kind of asking me this. I've always thought about, how do we protect, animals, kids, and Mother Earth? I mean, we can't survive without taking care of our planet. And so I started out in my early days at Keep Austin Beautiful and Keep Texas Beautiful. I still drive my whole entire family crazy by, constantly saying reduce, reuse, recycle or repurpose, And so one person's trash is another person's treasure. So it's anybody that knows me knows that I hardly leave, food to be thrown away or when I'm cleaning out the garage, I try to repurpose things when I see things in the neighborhood. So I've done that a lot. But then when I went to work, I did work for the Partnership for Healthy Mississippi, doing an anti-tobacco campaign for several years, and just that feeling of, and we focused primarily on children and children making healthy lifestyle choices. And it was a statewide campaign. So when I moved back to Texas, I very intentionally chose to go to work for an organization that was really meaningful in our community. And kids have always, even as a child, I remember thinking, we're the future. And I still believe that. That I think is what drives me every day, is that kids don't get a choice about where they're born, who they're born into, what country, what, socioeconomic status, and they're given they're kind of given their fate at birth. And so if we can protect them and give them the best chance for a great future, then they give back they give back to us as a society. And so I've just always felt like we needed to spend our energies there. And one of the things that I had witnessed, in my previous position was kids that had seen their, terrible, terrible, violent acts in their own homes and had to witness things that no child should have to witness. And it's the thing that actually does bring me to my knees. And I realized that if we could help some of these people get out of these situations so that their children never have to witness a killing of a parent or a suicide of a parent, and that just moved me to do bigger things statewide for Texas Advocacy Project.
Very, very well said. And what came across is your heart, and your heart really encompasses so much more of vulnerable populations, but also Mother Earth. I love that reference of Mother Earth and just, making sure that you're protecting and helping everybody however you can. And I know one of the reasons we're here today is to talk about your annual signature fundraising event. I know it's your biggest fundraiser, which is the Black and White Ball. And, congratulations on a 20th anniversary. Very few galas get to 20 years and steadily grow like this one has into, a seven-figure, powerhouse. But talk about the importance of how the Black and White Ball has helped tap message, provide funds, and amplify the voice of the organization throughout the state to build this awareness.
Definitely. I love to talk about that. I believe that, events they're labor intensive, but they're also your funnel for new donors and return donors. And I think also donors want to feel like they can help. So those committees that come together to help put, a big gala together are really important. They become your family. You spend so much time with them, and you're brainstorming, and you're all, hitting the streets to try to make this happen, and you're all focused on one goal, which is typically a monetary goal. But the reality is galas are our opportunity to tell our story. And it's often difficult, especially when you have a subject matter like domestic abuse, human trafficking, child abuse. Those are very difficult subjects to approach when people are eating and drinking and socializing. But the reality is we are doing a disservice to our audience and to our clients if we don't stop and take a minute to remind people why we're there, in addition to raising money. And that's to raise awareness about the issue. A lot of people don't think this can happen to them. And then as soon as they hear about it, it may not be happening to them, but somebody will come to them and say, this is happening, or I think this is happening in, my family. What do I do about it? So I have I've always believed that you gotta keep the secrets out of the dark. You gotta, bring light to the issue, and then that's how we make a difference.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, and I want to touch upon a piece that you had brought up of, people are there to socialize and do all those things. So how do you, and you have a lot of really good experience with this. How do you balance the line of fun and the urgency of a mission that's a very, 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 for lack of a better word, sober topic?
Well, I can tell you one of the most important things about planning an event is you better follow that timeline. You know that because you have such, you've got a captive audience and they are there to have a good time. Yes, many of them are there because they've been around the mission, they believe in the mission, and that's why they've brought, guests to the actual event so they can introduce, the organization and the mission to those people. I was, very excited to see the black and white ball last year for the first time. I've known about the black and white ball for many, many years, but never had the good fortune to go. And I can tell you the pace of that event was very high energy. And so, we kept on time, we kept our script, but there's always a right time that you have to stop and take a minute to call everybody's attention to why we're here. And you just the room is hot, they're on a high, and then you do have to bring it down for a minute, but then the lift back up is that we're going to give people the opportunity to make a difference by participating in the live auction, or the fund and eat or paddles up, the fundraising portion. Some events kind of package that mission video in between the live auction and the paddles up. I think it depends on your audience, and I think that's the most important thing. Anything that we're doing from a marketing standpoint is to know your audience. This audience expects a really fast-paced evening. And coincidentally, we do all of our more humbling, I guess that's not really the right word that I'm looking, but the we talk about the mission right up front. And then we actually, then do our live auction and our paddles up. And then, but because at the black and white ball, we bring in one of our former clients and we call that person our courage honoree. And so we're honoring that person. So for us, we actually have a real person up there. Whereas in other organizations, they may play a video and have to tell their story. Lights are brought down, tell their story, and really connect the audience to what's happening. We're very fortunate in that we do look throughout the year for somebody that may be willing and in the right place in their life and in their journey to actually be up there on stage and let us honor them and recognize that they've come from being a victim to a survivor. And I just think it's a delicate line to walk, and it's one that people typically will thank us afterwards if their friends go away knowing why they were there. So I think it rarely backfires unless you aren't very direct and they're not clear on what you do. So I guess that's a tricky thing if it's a complicated, it's a complicated organization. I mean, criminal and civil justice systems are not, they're very complicated, and it's a hard story to tell.
It is, and I'm glad one that you brought up the Courage Award, and it's, I gotta say, it is extremely impactful. Videos are great, but to have someone come up and, the person last year who received the award gave a very succinct, brief speech, but it was very impactful and everyone felt it, and that allowed you all to have a record-breaking night with the auction because of that. So talk a little bit more about, the select, because that's one of those things where, because people can often struggle with, well, donors are saying no. Honorees saying no. Yours is kind of a fine, the honoree you're having is much different than most other organization honorees, which is they've supported the honor organization for 25 years. Yours is much more service based. So what advice would you give to someone who, you know, they're getting a lot of no's with honorees because you're probably going to have that with what you do more than most other organizations, just the nature of is someone willing to put themselves out there that emotionally and that vulnerably versus someone who's, volunteered or given to the organization for 10, 15, 20 years.
I do think that's, excuse me, thank you for asking that because we, just like with any partnership or any person that you're going to connect your organization to, vetting is not the right word because we need to be very, very sensitive and it's got to be client first. And so we're extremely trauma, focused and informed in everything we do, from the legal services that we provide, to identifying our courage honoree. And time helps. You can't erase what's happened to that person, but they may be in a better position, given more time, given the success of their case, given the amount of support they may have, both, through our organization and their own support system. And so I think taking all of that into account before you actually talk to somebody about being a courage honoree, we we are very, and we also talk to our legal services and our social workers that have worked with our clients to get their opinion before we ever even talk to somebody about putting them in that position. So we're pretty cautious about how we do that, or we are very cautious about how we do that. And so I think that it's been very, very successful through the years. I mean, fortunately for some of our clients, or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, the last three Courage honorees that we brought in, not last year's, but the three prior to that, the criminal justice system essentially failed them. They're, you know, two of them were left for dead, and their perpetrator, alleged at the time, uh, went through a criminal trial and got like deferred adjudication. I think one got probation from social media for 10 years. I mean, that's horrific. But we were able to actually get lifetime protective orders for them. So, they feel like the Texas Advocacy Project gave them the only justice, that they received. And so, fortunately for us, that we leave them with a very positive feeling. So I think that's why it's able to project in the room that way, because they do feel like they had their day in court.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I'm glad, like last year's, like you said, the three before last year, but last year's, what I thought was really powerful about last year's was it felt, I don't want to say transformative, but that how Texas Advocacy Project really helped them rebuild their life and be in a place where they felt comfortable and confident. And thankfully, I was seated basically like at the table right next to where the honoree was, and you could just feel the love for this person that was there and that they had their own community. And to me, that really added a lot to the event because she had her people with her there. And because people got to physically see that and she had her own cheering quarter, that permeated the rest of the room. And I could literally feel it with that table that she had with her peers there or with her friends there. It really kind of helped uplift the room. And I think that's, was one of the key reasons why y'all had a record-breaking year last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's their time to shine, and there are celebrities, so we treat them like that. we make sure that we're in contact with them for months because we do film them. So we do still have that, a short video, but that highlights our courage honoree. But we're also with that person, throughout that process. And then, making sure that they have everything that they need for that night. And from, making sure that we help them with even to be with them while they go help pick out jewelry and I don't know that we helped with the dresses. I don't know that actual history there, but I guess I'll get to learn this year.
Well, and the fun thing is that you're celebrating that person for having courage to come forward, but two, just showing their perseverance and having a strong person like that be a good ambassador. And last year's recipient gave it was brief, but it was very impactful, and the room really, you could really feel it in the room. And it was highly successful for that reason. And I kind of want to go into, and I know you'll have a lot to say about this piece. Good events start because they've got a good devoted following. So what's one thing an organization can do to create a strong core following for its gala? So you've got a base for success already lined in, so that you can bring in new folks and really take it to the next level.
Well, before I start with that, let me think about that for a minute. I do want to say shout out to our teen ambassador that we bring into the event, which brings in the element of prevention education, a program that we do. We're actually getting ready to have our Teen Ambassadors of Hope event here in Austin on April 12th at Union Point on the lake. And we're expanding that program to Dallas this year. So we'll be in Dallas on April 18th. And that we highlight one of our teens from the program, at the ball. And I tell you, last year's teen ambassador really, impacted that room as well. So I'm grateful that we still have that program and have some great supporters that are funding that program, although we are still searching for investors this year. May as well say that while I have an opportunity.
Always be selling,
And
Debbie. Always be selling.
always be selling, exactly. But I think, through the years, I've been very, very fortunate in that there have been people that have been tied to successful events. People come and go, but there's always a few that just stick. And as long as you have those people that stick, others can come and go because people can't always, people's lives change, their kids grow, their jobs change. And so, as a nonprofit, you're working with volunteers. So they're volunteers, so they get to dictate when they come back around or when they decide to leave. And so we want to do our best to keep them engaged and make respect their time, respect their connections, their ideas, and hopefully they have a good time while they're helping plan an event. And then they always immediately after a successful event, they want to, they want to come back, which is wonderful. Sometimes that's how you get your chair to stick. You can ask Jamie Ember that about last year. She said Heather got her right on stage. There we're announcing the final number, and I think Heather asked, are you in for next year? Anyway, so we were laughing about that earlier this week at one of our committee meetings. But the reality is, those committees, we've got people on the Black and White Ball Committee that have been there for 10 years, 20 years. Linda Poole. Everybody knows Linda Poole in town. Linda is retired from the JW Marriott, and she joined our committee this year. Well, she's been at the Black and White Ball as often as Heather, our CEO. And so she's been there for all 20 years. And so that's very exciting to have that kind of longevity, but then bringing new, fresh people in all the time because, finding live auction items is not easy. And the same people can't ask their same friends over and over again. One, their friends get tired of being asked. And two, the live auction is stale. So having new people, to rotate in is really important, I think, to the success of any, gala that's going to last for many years.
Well, I want to go back to something you said about getting Jamie, to commit to chairing the next year, and that is the importance of long-term planning. And, a gala process is a year plus, and anyone who's raising seven figures knows it's a year plus. It is not 3 to 6. It is a much longer window. So talk about the importance of long-term planning when you're creating a successful gala.
I love that question and that topic. In a perfect world, I think everybody should have their, I mean, you can have a co-chair situation and, where you maybe have a lead chair and a chair coming up behind, like a second chair, so that if you could get your chair to commit for 2 years, then you've got the next person in line, almost like a president and vice president role or a chair and incoming chair role on a board. And so with we and it's worked through the years, that works sometimes. But like right now, we've asked Jamie to, we need to be talking about, who is going to take this on this next year because we want to get them involved with the committee now so that they have a year of watching, the ins and outs of how it works. Because even when that happens, I always find that the second year for somebody chair is always the year that they just feel better about the job that they've done because they've had to answer questions and they've worked closely with staff and they've built those relationships. And so even somebody that goes through the process as a committee member that eventually chairs, will still have a learning curve that first year they're chairing. So I definitely think a couple of years of a commitment is a good plan. And there are times when it might, we've had people chair longer and you have to be careful and just remember that the event belongs to the organization and so you can't lose that by having, I guess, the same chair over and over and over again. I guess there are some models that may work, but I think with in today's world, we're constantly keeping up with there's just so many opportunities to change an event year after year, whether it's the design or the lighting or the venue, and just keeping that freshness in it is very helpful.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the importance of the committee and, the 2 year commitment thing. I'm seeing that increasingly with a lot of galas. Not every gala, but I do see it more and more often, largely because if you do commit to 2 years, the first year you're kind of taking what you had, what was already there and kind of putting your stamp on it. The second year, you're really kind of able to put your stamp on it. So, before I kind of go into the stamp of a successful event, can you talk about, the keys to creating a strong relationship between an event chair or event chairs with the nonprofit? Because I've walked into many rooms where I can tell they don't get along and you can feel it. So what are the keys to creating that strong relationship so that when everyone walks in the room, it's just a room of love?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I mean, I'm sitting here, there's flashing through my brain, all the chairs of the last 20 years. And, I am so appreciative of every single one of them. They've done such amazing jobs for the organizations. And, if you're listening to this, I would list all of you, but I'd hate to miss someone. But they're giving their time, time, talent, treasure. We always say that. But they're working overtime. I mean, they're thinking about it when they go to bed, they're thinking about it when they wake up, their name's on it. So it's their reputation is tied to the success of this event. And so, quite honestly, I think just knowing that we as staff are available to them and that we end up figuring out, the best time to communicate with them, how they like to communicate. Is texting best? We know their family situation, their work situations, and just being respectful that they have lives outside of this job. And but just I think having fun with it too. But listening, I'm a talker, everybody knows that, but you got to pay attention in the room. If somebody's kind of read that body language. They may not be comfortable and maybe can't address it right there in the room, but you need to recognize that maybe that happened and talk about it. But yeah, I feel so blessed to have such a wonderful list of women that and men that I've worked with through the years. And thank you, shout out to anybody that's willing to chair a gala that takes you a year to plan.
Very, 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 very well said. But I especially appreciate, I don't think anyone's ever mentioned it before, that they are not staff. They are
They are
giving
not.
their time. No one's ever said it that succinctly before on this program. So thank you for saying that, because it is so important to realize that they are helping you. So you have to extend that kindness in kind of a reciprocal way, because they are basically, a chair is almost like the ultimate volunteer in terms of what they're doing, because they're going to help you raise 6 or 7 figures in one night by getting a whole bunch of people in the room. And I know I had mentioned earlier about putting a stamp on a successful fundraising event. So you have been a part of many successful fundraising events over the years. So as a newer member of TAP, how do you put your own stamp on something that's already successful while maintaining that familiar feel to for the guests who are attending?
I thought you were going to ask me something else.
You know
Meaning I
what?
was
Guide the
thinking about,
conversation, Debbie.
and my brain, it goes over here sometimes. But no, I was actually, I was thinking about there are a lot of people that know me that have worked with me that know that sometimes I hang on to things a little too tightly and I'm not willing to move and flex as maybe I should. And so thank you to all those people out there that have put up with that. It's not about being stubborn. There are some things that just aren't broke. And sometimes you don't need to make extreme decisions because of one variable or another. And so, the black and white ball is successful. The formula has worked. And so, what I was luckily asked to do was to just watch it this last year and brought in somebody I trust immensely to actually watch it with some eyes and ears as well. And, when I got such great feedback from her as well, it just and I got so much good feedback from everybody that was there that it was really a fun, energetic event. And very rarely does your CEO, at least in my experience, actually carry the event like Heather does the black and white ball. I mean, she's up there. She keeps the pace going. And she's been with the organization more than 20 years. So, she's the face of the organization. And she loves a microphone, thank goodness. And so, for me to put my stamp on it, basically what I want to be able to do is raise more money each year and prove that we can do that. We've added some more sponsorships this year to get there. We've worked with some sponsors to maybe refine what would work better for them. And so a lot of times it's things that aren't so obvious that make it work. Adding, a new revenue enhancer, improving upon, a transition from, the reception to the actual gala portion to our after party that is a casino. So it's essentially a whole additional event right after, our main event. And so if you think about it, it's kind of three events in one and making sure that people want to be there for all three and stay and, come early, stay late and talk about it, for the next week. So that's what I hope to do this year. And with it being the 20th anniversary, I think we can do that. We are working with, we have some great sponsors already lined up. DeBella, thank you to DeBella for being our title sponsor. Our Afterglow sponsor is BMW of Austin, and Biety is our reception sponsor. So we have the three main event sponsors locked in, which is good. And now it's a matter of looking at how we work with those other sponsors to make sure that their experience as a sponsor and our attendees' experience are working together.
Very, very, very well said. And congrats on having the title sponsor secured so far in advance, because that's really an important thing that really fuels the engine for growth. And there's one thing about your event in particular I really like, and it may come out of left field a little bit, but that is that you have something called mystery gifts. And I find the mystery gifts to be so inventive and so fun because it allows people, basically, regardless of how much money they have to give something. So, explain what mystery gifts are and how they engage guests, because I really love it as a concept.
I don't know if you, I don't know if people remember grab bags. When I was a kid, I would go into this one convenience store near my house. Apparently, it was 2 blocks away, and so I was allowed to walk across the church parking lot and go into this convenience store. And they were little brown bags, and I don't remember what they were. I don't know if they were worth a nickel or dime. I don't remember, but if you had some extra change, after buying your soda, Coke in Texas. You could get one of those grab bags and you didn't know what was going to be in there. It might be a piece of candy or a piece of gum, but it was kind of fun because it was a mystery. And so I like to think of our mystery gifts as a grab bag for adults. And it the mystery gifts are also a beautiful display. So the way that our committee, they collect lots of different items from retailers and restaurants, across the city and the state, and they wrap them in black and white, stripes and polka dots and plaids, and so they're beautifully displayed. They're all different sizes, and so you're like, as an adult, it's like, oh, which one do I want? And no matter what you pay, there's 3 levels: 100, 250, and 500. No matter what you pay, you're going to get something of that value or greater. And so you know that you've made a good investment. And if it's something you don't want, then give it away. It's a great gift for somebody else. But the reality is they're all really great items from different companies across the community. So we're really appreciative of all the retailers and the restaurants that help. And there's massages and pedicures, and there's all kinds of great things. So it's just a fun way to give, and it allows people to give that maybe aren't able to to participate in the live auction, where the money's a lot higher. We are adding a couple of new revenue enhancers this year to because we usually have around 150 mystery gifts, but we should have more than 500 people, and so we want to give people another opportunity to give, and they can buy a mystery gift and one of our revenue enhancers. They're going to be very different.
That's amazing. I'm glad you mentioned, the piece of, that it's of equal or greater value, one, but two, your event's in the fall. So like when you mentioned the whole, it can be gifted to somebody else. I remember somebody, it was like, I think it was last year, may have been the year before, where they said, I got this mystery gift and it was perfect for my sibling. So they actually gave, and they were like, Christmas is coming up because it's in a couple months. So they already had their gift. They didn't have to think about it. And this sibling was apparently like the most difficult person to shop for. So I'm glad you mentioned that piece. Is there is nothing wrong with the mystery gift. If it's for you, great. And if it just spreads the love and it spreads the giving. That's what I loved about your story with that.
And
But
people buy, I mean, we have some
yeah.
people that buy like all different levels. They'll buy 4 or 5 because they have fun. It's like you mentioned Christmas, like early Christmas, because you get to unwrap your gifts right there and see what you get. And so literally I'll see people walking around with multiple boxes. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Now, are there any other things that guests can expect to experience at the 20th for the 20th anniversary that you can tease? If you can't tease anything, you're not the first guest that will have said I can't tease anything. But if there is anything, feel free to share it.
Well, I mentioned having some new sponsorships, which could add some fun ideas to the evening and experiences for the evening. And I think we're just now, well, we're excited. We've looked at our we kind of know what the look is going to be. I mean, yes, it's still black and white, but how do you, we're just always thinking about how do you engage your guests from the minute they walk off the elevator. In our case, we drive everybody to the elevator versus the escalator so that they're all starting in one place. And from the minute they start at registration, all the way, walking through the infamous hallway that we always have at the black and white ball into the reception area. Just, keeping them engaged and, from the minute they walk in until the minute we award those casino prizes at the end of the night.
Very well said. And yes, the entrance, if you love an entrance, this is the event for you to go to because it really is cool. And I'm not going to say anything more. That's a tease so that people will buy tickets for this year. And I know we're coming up on time today. And I'm going to be especially interested because you would just have such a wealth of experience on this matter. But that is, what is one thing all successful galas have in common?
Well, Rob, you told me it's different depending on the market.
That I
So
did.
you did. I do think making sure they don't feel like they're going too long. I want to quote Jennifer Stevens, but I didn't ask her permission, so I'm not going to. I was going to text her this morning, but she has a wonderful saying that we all adhere to. But the reality is, you want people to be there to start out, you know, drinking, socializing. In fact, a lot of times at some of the events I've been to, one in particular, it's really hard to get people to quit socializing so that you can get them seated into the ballroom to start on time. Because people want to run on time, but that means they have to actually get seated on time so that we can get started with the evening. But yeah, I think making sure that you're talking about your mission. That well, first people are there, they're comfortable, they're having fun. That they have, there's drinks flowing, that there is, great, timing on everything and the right timing depending on your audience, and just making sure that you talk about the mission and that you ask for that support. I mean, really, that's the most important thing. People know why they're there. And we can't be afraid to ask. Now, if you can seed the room, for your paddles up and your auction, you should definitely do that because there's nothing worse than a quiet moment when you don't want it to be a quiet moment. So that's when you don't want the pause. You want that paddle to go up as quickly as it'll go up.
Well, I love that it's, keep it high energy. Really, the takeaway is if you keep it high energy and put impactful moments in, then your gal is bound to be successful. And from this conversation, I can see why you've hosted so many over the years. I can't wait to be a part of the one this year. So, Debbie, thank you for your friendship over the years and taking the time. It's been an honor to chat with you and to appear on Fun and Fundraising. So, thank you.
Oh my gosh, Rob, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And, I was a little nervous about it, but I realized you're right. We're just talking like we did at the ball. I had the good fortune to sit with you at the ball this past year. So I don't know where they'll place us this next year, but, or, this year, but I hope you have September 26th marked on your calendar.
I do. I have it marked and circled. And with that, the black and white ball, the 20th annual black and white ball,
20th. Yes.
benefiting
Yes.
the Texas Advocacy Project, will be held on September 26, 2026 at the JW Marriott in Austin, Texas. For more information, please visit texasadvocacyproject.org. And Debbie was right. Advocacy is a mouthful. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.